Welcome to the Let's Talk Basketball podcast. Here is your extra handsome host, Reese. Welcome everybody to the Let's Talk Basketball podcast, and this is episode 1, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you Sammy Roscoe. Sammy, thank you so much for joining me here.
Oh, of course, thanks for having me.
So, how's you being from Australia? How's the lockdown been so far? Like over there?
Well, I was really lucky in Australia. I'm from the West Coast, and we had 0 cases for the longest time. So obviously going back home, I had to quarantine for the 2 weeks, didn't leave the house. And then after that, probably about 2 weeks later, after my quarantine, gyms opened, everything like that. So I was in lifting, individuals, all that. So yeah, I was very lucky.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it was very hectic to come, back from, to go from England back to Australia, and just what's going on? And I guess, like you say, you were very lucky to have everything open so quickly as well.
Yeah, well, and it was crazy too, because obviously here it was mid-season, and I remember Jeff Jones, our coach, saying, "Oh, this weekend's postponed." I'm like, okay, yeah, no worries. We'll play it later on. A couple of days later, league's cancelled. 2 days after that, I'm home. So it was very hectic, but.
I mean, I guess you'd have to try and organise flights, organise that you're coming back, telling family members, it's everything's coming at you in different directions.
Yeah, it was definitely intense. But.
So before we get into this, a very interesting podcast, for those watching, we are going to be talking about the women's evolution here in basketball across the world. So let's go back to where your basketball journey began. So what kind of got you into basketball? What kind of get you hooked?
Well, I was probably about 5 or 6 when I started playing. I had a friend in primary school say, "Oh, do you want to fill in for one game?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, young and." I was running the wrong direction, all that. But ever since that, I never stopped playing, and then started playing semi-pro when I was 14, and that's kind of where I started to grow as a player and continued.
So is basketball pretty big in Australia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very big.
So what kind of how big of an impact did the leagues across the world have on you? Was it like a easily accessible thing to watch?
Yeah, I think the NBA and all that is obviously big worldwide. But the Pro League in Australia, the NBL and WNBL is quite big as well. So you always have something to aspire to or something professional to watch, which is good.
Did you have, a couple of idols growing up, either, NBL or WNBL?
Not really. For me, basketball was always just for fun.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have any idols. As such, I never thought my career would go where it has. So it was always just a bit of fun playing with my friends until I got to the point I can make a career out of it.
I mean, that's kind of how everyone starts out, They're like, the first bounce of the ball, you're like, this is quite therapeutic. Yeah. And then, you sort of go, start playing, you're like, oh, I'm pretty good at this. Because the position that you play, you're a forward / center, being 6'4". Have you always been, quite, on the tall side?
No, actually growing up, I was quite short. And I think that's kind of why when I play now, I like to shoot outside shots and that, because I was quite average growing up. I think I was about probably 15 when I started to really grow. And it was that point people were like, all right, time to get in the post.
So, I mean, watching the clips of yourself, and you do have a very reliable, jump shot, which is something that you don't necessarily see amongst, the taller players of the team. How did you start with the shot and then evolve that shot when you did start, your growth spurt?
Well, I think it's quite funny because right before I went to college in America, I was actually left-handed. So I shot with my left hand.
Oh.
And I was practicing with the pro team in Perth. And the coach, obviously I hurt my left elbow. And they said, I was messing around with my right. They said, if you can make, I think it was 100 free throws with your right, I'm switching you over. And so it was at that point I actually switched. So at that point I was 16. And that's when I switched to my right hand. And so it was pretty much starting over, but it's the best thing I ever did. Because as you said, definitely helped my shot, I think.
And you mentioned going to the University of North Dakota. What was that like? Trying to fit in, big surroundings of America. What was it like? You making the journey? I mean, I'm guessing it was a very long plane trip as well.
Yes, it took me about 40 hours total with layovers and all that. And I think with the basketball as well, it was a huge difference. I know a lot of English people feel the same. You go from your structure and how you've learned to play to over to America is a whole new level, a lot more intense.
Yeah.
You know, I never lifted before I went to college. So it was a huge difference, but the adjustment, I think it really helped me mature. And as a player, I definitely developed.
What sort of stands out as some of the highlights from your time in North Dakota?
I think my freshman year was a highlight. We actually went to the March Madness
Uh,
tournament, which was
nice.
amazing. Yeah, we won our conference. And for me, as I said, I didn't really follow basketball like that growing up, so I didn't know what it was. All my teammates are like, "Oh, we're going to the, March Madness, this, that," and I was like, "Oh, that's cool." I think it was about my sophomore, junior year. I was like, "Oh, that's a big deal." So that was definitely a highlight.
I mean, like you hear the name, it's like, oh, March Madness, that's a pretty cool name, and then you don't realize how big of a deal it actually is when it gets to that time. So national coverage everywhere. So what was that like? Playing under a really big spotlight.
Yeah, it was actually crazy. So we played against Texas A&M, and during conference we didn't travel private jets, all that. But for March Madness, you got your private plane, you had your interviews, all that. It was insane.
How hectic were the media days? Were they quite intense?
Yeah, they definitely were. So, you'd go in for your practice and you have your slot. You have to show your IDs, all that. And then I think there was about half an hour where media can come in. They'll say, Sam Roscoe, you're out here for 15. And it was crazy.
Was it like just a huge line of like media crew, like just sort of waiting with microphones, like, come on, hurry up?
I wouldn't say it was that big, but no, it was definitely bigger than what we were used to, at least.
Yeah. So going from playing in North Dakota, there is a clip online that's got quite a few views, and it's a very impressive shot. So you make a buzzer beater at the end of the third quarter. What's going through your head as soon as you hit that shot?
It's quite funny because I remember my teammate after the game was like, "You're welcome for passing the ball." Basically, I just launched it as far as I could with my left hand because I used to be left, so everyone
Yeah.
thought it's crazy, but for me, I was like, whatever. And had nothing in my head. I was just throw it up, hope for the best. It goes in, and I was like, oh, I think even in the video you can see me going, oh,
Yeah.
dang it.
You sort of like you throw it up. It's like so when you hit shots like that, you kind of like gotta play it cool.
Yeah,
But in your head, you're like, yes.
I just did that. Yeah.
So you mentioned that your teammate was like, "Oh, you're welcome." What were the rest of your team? Or what were like the rest of your team's reaction when the ball went through the net?
It was quite crazy because it tied the game at that point. So I remember walking to the bench and our coach was like, "Everyone, shut up," because we couldn't hear. The crowd was so loud, and yeah, it was crazy. And then after the game, it actually ended up on ESPN top
Yeah.
10. So everyone's like, "Oh, turn your TV on, turn your TV on." So yeah, it's quite funny.
It's very crazy. The amount of coverage that you do get, like even in the NCAA, like it's like it's insane, like the amount of coverage that not like even these like 16, 17-year-olds are getting in college, compared to maybe other leagues, like again, like the Australian league, like the BBL, and the WBBL as well. Like the amount of coverage that they get is it's like world spread. Like the
Yeah.
the entire population is falling at the feet of these like little kids, pretty much.
Well,
um
I think that's what America do quite well compared to other countries is that media coverage. Because like here, the WBBL isn't even live streamed. So to have, especially to go from college, where my parents were in Idaho, I think, and they saw our game from North Dakota on the TV. You go from that kind of establishment to you can't even watch the games for the next day. I think that's where America really establishes that prestige
yeah.
basketball.
Absolutely, and you're mentioning you playing in the WBBL. You played with the Manchester Mystics. What was it like? Moving from was it like because you mentioned like there's a different style from playing in Australia to the going and playing in North Dakota. Was that a big step to like sort of evolving your game as well to playing in Manchester as well?
Yeah, I think so. Between Australia and America, they're quite structured basketball. So one thing that I noticed when I came to England, it was a bit less structured and more, gritty,
Yeah,
kind of like taking it to the basket type basketball. I think one thing that did help me evolve for coming here was maturity. So going into a pro league and kind of like establishing myself as a player into a new team and things like that. I think that definitely transitioned over from college.
I mean, one of your first games for the Mystics, you put up some very impressive numbers: 29 points and 7 boards. you know, how did you were sort of like feeding the hot hand. So like how many assists did your teammates get in that game?
I honestly cannot remember, but I think from memory, if it's the game I'm thinking of, me and Georgia Jones actually went back to back.
Yeah.
So I'd hit a shot, she'd hit a shot, and I think one thing we did good as a team is if someone's hitting, you keep passing the ball and feeding them the ball, and that's what I loved about Manchester too. We were such a team,
Hmm.
we really played together, which was good.
You mentioned Georgia Jones. She's a very talented player as well, and I think the both of you on that Mystics team was quite something to behold. Like you both are extremely talented when it comes to you got your different styles as well because George is very good at your outside, and then you've got the height where you can bring it straight to the basket, which is a very good asset when basically it's like the bigger the Shaq Kobe kind of
I like
the
that.
tandem. So so your time with the Mystics, like what again? I'll bring it back to some of the highlights. What were some of the best parts for you playing in Manchester for the 2 years?
The highlights. I'd have to say just traveling with the team, being with the Mystics. We were such a close team. We had so much fun. I think one game that I remember is we had 7 players because of injuries and stuff like that.
Oh
I think
wow.
it was against the
Mm.
Essex Rebels. Um, Ended up with 5 because 2 people fouled out. Went into overtime.
Whoa.
So yeah, it was a tough game. It was a lot of minutes that game, but I remember it being a good one. So.
I'm guessing you had the ball a lot in your hands in that game.
I think also Georgia at this point. It was definitely her game, but yeah.
So moving on, like you finish your time with the Mystics. The season's cut short. What kind of tell us what was running through your head when you got the announcement of the season was cut short, and you got to try and find something to do in the meantime, as well as also trying to figure out what you're doing next season as well.
It was quite tough because I knew coming out of that season it would be my last with the Mystics. So the whole thing that season was, one more is this core group, like let's finish out on a good one. And then, yeah, as I said, postponed and cancelled. It was really tough. But for me, in between the Mystic seasons, I go home and play.
Mm.
So every time our last game with the Mystics, I go home and that weekend I have a game. So for me, it was, oh, you're going back to the next season. But even that was obviously cancelled and I didn't actually get to play any games over there. So yeah, it was pretty much just, all right, for me, prepare for the next one if it's going to happen, if not. But it was definitely tough to finish that way with a group that I cared and loved for so much.
Yeah, and you mentioned traveling with the team and like so what's like what sort of things go on inside like a mini bus that like the fans don't necessarily get to see like the playing around like the potential pranks
Yeah.
what's the typical journey like for for just a casual team?
Well, as the Mystics, we like to say we're probably the weirdest team in the
Oh really?
WBBL. Yeah, we're an odd group, but we used to sing in the bus and just make fun of each
Jeez.
other. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We'd always be joking around, making fun of each other.
What's the favorite go-to song for what was the favorite go-to song for the team?
I don't think we really had one. All I remember is one time we're traveling and we're singing old songs from TV shows. That's the one I remember. But a weird group, but
I mean, what else is there to do? I think a lot of the individuals in certain teams like they like to keep to themselves. They'll put their headphones on, they'll listen to music, try and get into the game atmosphere. Whereas if you're on on the coach, you're singing with the team, you're having fun, you're more likely to go out there and win games and have a lot more team chemistry, which is very good thing, and that's probably why the Mystics were so great. So I think that. I mean, would you say that you had a lot of team chemistry when it came to the playing of the games after after you guys had bonded for so long?
yeah, as you said, I think transitioning that closeness from off court onto court really helps because at that point, you don't really care if you're the one scoring, if it's your teammate, if it's your stats, someone else. All you're thinking about is for the team, what can I do to contribute to the win rather than what can I do to get my stats. So I think it definitely helped us as a group to really care about each other like that.
So from there, you are moving to Göttingen in Germany. So what are you expecting moving over to Germany and trying to adapt your style of play to the German league?
Well, I've been watching a bunch of the games from over there. It's quite fast paced, and I like the way the team plays. It's a lot of pick and roll, pick and pop, which obviously I
Yeah.
like to do. Um, so I think for me, it's just kind of adapting to that new level of professional. Um, yeah, kind of see how I go over there.
Have you had any contact with any of the players that you could potentially be playing with next season, or is it kind of you going in blind?
Yeah, I haven't yet, but I actually had a teammate from college who
Okay.
played for that team last year. So, she's told me it's a lovely group of girls. You'll fit in, you'll like it. So I'm not too worried about the new team.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's they're all learning experiences. I'm playing basketball all around the world. You're going to have a lot more. I mean, moving from Australia to then going to play in America to England, you've kind of had to do it, a couple of times and
Mhm.
reshuffling the pack. So, I mean, the experience in Germany could be like any other. You can fit in exactly, singing on the bus, Although the songs could be in German, mind you, but
Yeah, I might struggle there.
so, what are you looking to do? Game wise or like working wise to get to the next level for the next season.
So during this COVID situation, I've really been working on my ball handling because I think I have the outside shot. Obviously, I'm tall enough to try get inside, but that's the one part that I was quite weak with. So between being in England and back home, I did a bunch of individuals ball handling, just so I have that next threat of, okay, they fly out at me, obviously, because I like to shoot. So I have that next move, the
Mm.
counteractive.
Definitely, like I mean, if you got an impressive jump shot and you can finish, pump fakes are great. You just try and elevate the game as much, and I think that the more and more that you evolve, especially especially when you have all the skills to do it, you can be one of the potentially the great players of of your time. So I think that's something that's a very good skill, and I mean going forward with the with this podcast and its main topic for today, the evolution of women's basketball, and with the WNBA coming up, Diana Taurasi, Candace Parker, and those sorts of names. What would you say through your experiences? Where could you see the women's basketball improving, like game wise, or coverage, or like national spread? What do you think is the way forward for women's basketball?
I think the main thing is media coverage, because there is a lot of skill in women's basketball, but people don't really get to see it because it's not around. So as I said, the WBBL isn't even live streamed. Our games at the Mystics, people didn't even know that they were on. I think if you can get people in to watch as the first step, that'll really help develop it. Younger kids will see, oh, as a woman or as a little girl, I can play. And I think that will really help get it to the next level.
So where do you think like it lies? Do you think it lies with like TV deals, or do you think it's more to do with the actual leagues to try and get the national coverage that the games deserve?
Well, I think it needs to start with the community because you
Mm,
can't go into a television station and say put us on TV
yeah,
because I'll say, well, there's no reason for us to do so. You know what I mean? So I think as a community, if the individual clubs and teams try get that spread out, try bring in more kids younger, and develop that step up of when I'm in under 12s, my goal is to play for the Manchester Mystics women's team. If you can start with spreading it around the community, then you can go in and say, look, these are the numbers we get into the crowds or that. And then I think that will help get to that next stage of television. But
yeah.
I think it's the process.
I've been speaking to a lot of a lot of the other pros that think like yeah, it does kind of start with the schools. Like if
Yeah.
the pro players do go into the schools, they're like, oh wow, I can be like him, and sort of start that gradual like lesson of trying to make basketball a bit more of a national sport. I know that in the UK, it's definitely on the back burner. Like we are far from anything here in the UK, whereas in America, you just have to pick up a ball and you have a chance. I mean, well, technically picking up a ball in the UK and playing basketball, you have more of a chance to be a pro than in the States because there's so many that want to play.
Yeah.
But where being 7 foot in the UK, you almost have to go over to the States to try and
Yeah.
do that. So with that media coverage, do you think that there's sort of a bit of a bias? Do you think towards the men's game, or do you think it's something else that certain TV stations don't want to put on?
I definitely think there is a bias, but then I think the bias comes from, there's this huge prestige of the NBA and all these big names that even non-basketball players know. You know what I mean? So like Steph Curry, LeBron James, everyone knows those names. Um, but I think someone needs to put that investment in. It won't have an immediate return, but if you put that initial investment into the women's side, it'll take a couple of years to get there, but eventually it'll come. But I think people are scared to do that initial investment because they won't get the return straight away.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of like basketball knowledge nowadays comes from technology, and one of those ways is through like the mode of NBA 2K. And recently, the WNBA was put onto that game, and that's where a lot of now like recent educational like, people are learning these names through NBA 2K. That's
Yeah,
kind of how I like sort of got to know all of the players for the NBA.
yeah.
So do you think like with the evolution of that game and then also the women's NBA getting put in there, do you think then there's going to be a kind of a peak for women's basketball going forward?
Yeah, I'm definitely optimistic. They're starting to make these different changes, especially with the salaries as well. They've increased the women's salary. So I think all these little changes will eventually make a bigger change where it's like, oh, women's basketball is actually as prestigious and as fun to watch. So
I mean, going forward with those salary changes and your career going forward. So would you plan to be an activist after say you've hang up the Jordans, you're ready to try and be an entrepreneur afterwards? Do you see yourself becoming like an activist for women's basketball and trying to push it to the next level?
yeah, well, definitely in England, I would, because especially seeing the difference between Australia and here. So in Australia, the women play before the men, and every men's team has a women's team. So you're always playing before the men. That gets the crowds in early. You have a bunch of coaching with the younger kids, so it's all connected and it's all like this established environment. So I think for me, when I'm done playing, trying to develop that kind of stuff here in England would definitely help because obviously I'm passionate about women's basketball. I've played since I was a child. So I think, yeah, when I'm done, if I can help establish something like that in England, it's definitely something I'd look into.
I mean, what do you think it is about England that doesn't quite get, it's not quite receptive to basketball yet? Like, it's such a fun sport to watch, yet
Mhm.
people prefer cricket and rugby. I don't get it.
I think maybe, especially the women's side, it's quite young. I know the league started only a couple of years before I got here. So I think, again, it's more like of a time and process type thing. So it's automatically behind because, obviously America and Australia have had years to develop to where it is. So I think, we have to be a bit patient with it, but also it is frustrating that it is taking that longer step to get there.
I mean, with the first steps that the WBBL have made in the past couple of years, I guess you could potentially say that you were one of the kind of the foundations of where the peak may have started for women's basketball. Like, how does it feel to like have come in at such a great time to be, well, not sort of the start of where this you know revolution of women's basketball is going to take off?
It's definitely exciting. Especially, yeah, I've played 3 years, and to see the development over those 3 years, even, it's definitely stepped up a level every year. Even some of my teammates that I've had with the Mystics have been playing since that first season of the first league. So yeah, it is quite exciting to see that development and that growth through my process here, and being with the players that have been there since literally day one. It's very cool to see.
And going back to the media coverage as well, like you just thinking of I think the reason why basketball may not be as covered in the UK is because there's not really a national tournament for those players. I mean, the London Lions this year, they're going into the Basketball Champions League, and that's sort of the first big step. Whereas we haven't had a lot of success when it comes to the national stage, like
Yeah.
Olympics and the Commonwealth Games. And I mean, that's just the men's side, but the coverage of the UK women's team, in fact, they have they've gone to semi-finals and they have gone to their teams have gone and done a lot of good things. So do you think there could be like way more coverage in the UK for women's basketball rather than the men's?
Yeah, definitely. As you said, the women have been very successful as of late, but then you don't really see it around the media. So I remember going into a school last year to kind of talk about women's basketball as a profession, things like that. And these kids were in awe. I remember I had about 2 or 3 girls come up to me and go, "Oh, when's your next game? I'd love to come." And the fact that
Right.
they had never seen or met a women's basketball player before, it's disappointing to kind of see like there's no connection between, oh, we have this amazing medalist team, but then younger kids don't even know about it.
Mm, exactly. I mean, it's kind of the same with like the US, and like football is like their men's team is not the best, and the women's team is phenomenal. Like they have won more World Cups than I can count, and
Mm-hmm.
you know they're all phenomenal. And I guess with the UK. The women's team, basketball wise, like the sort of swap the roles. Like the national sports have been crossed a bit, and you know the women are, you know, they're going well. You know they're brilliant.
Yeah.
And even still, with the football in the States as well, they're not as covered as the US men's are.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'll probably bring it back to: do you think it's institutional the way that it's covered, or do you think it's more just a I don't know whether it's funding or whether it's kind of just again that bias.
Yeah, I think there definitely is that bias between any men's and women's sport. But I don't really know how we can fix that. You know, it has to come from this stage of like expecting something from younger children of, oh, it's always women don't play sport, or, you know, you play like a girl, or things like that. We need to get rid of these stereotypes or these kind of ideas to develop this aspect of, oh, no, like women's sport is, we're there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah, it's tough.
I saw an amazing video the other week that was it was telling adults to throw like a girl, and it was, you know, the pansy, you know, sort of mocking. And
Yeah.
then they got the, you know, they got it was a mixture of, you know, males and females, and they got the kids in, and you know they were like, oh, run like a girl, and all the, you know, they were all just running with
Yeah.
their heads down. So there is something within society that does sort of turn that switch.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what that is, whether it is, you know, the gender stereotyping, or whether it is, you know, but you know, the parenting that's switching that as well.
Yeah.
So, where do you think that we need to start? Do you think it's building the next generation up to appreciate women's sports way more?
Yeah, well, I definitely think instead of being a woman athlete, it's you're an athlete. Because you look at people like Serena Williams, who's one of the greatest athletes in the world, but she's always the greatest female athlete.
Yeah,
And as you said, I think it's something that's taught as well, because you said these kids are running like a girl in their full sprint, but then it gets to a point in your life that you've been taught, or you're watching the media and it's all men, and you know they're very athletic, and the women aren't supposed to do that. And you can see on Instagram on the WNBA, all the comments underneath are, you know, jokes about women shouldn't be playing. They should, you know, it's definitely something that we need to change from teaching kids, I think, because it gets to a point where society is telling you as a woman that's not your career, that's not your profession.
yeah, and I think we've kind of slowly, within the, like, since the 2010s have hit, and we're going into the next generation. I think that you know, the sort of like feminism is like really fighting for that equality that is needed, just within society as a whole. And you know, with the likes of, you know, as you say, Serena Williams, Ronda Rousey as well, becoming one of the highest earners in the UFC. You know, there's countless amazing women that are doing countless amazing things, and again, it's not being covered as much. So, what would you say is, like, say, your responsibility as a professional to just keep the next generation moving forward?
Yeah, well, I think, especially the women's side, I think if we can get into more schools and teach rather than teaching both boys and girls, to prove that, you know, it's not just I can teach a girl because I'm a girl, or like I can actually teach you as a boy because I have the skill set to do so. So it's not, it's kind of getting rid of that disconnection
Mm.
between women and men as equals in sport. But I know a lot of women athletes would be happy to go into schools. It's just making that connection with the community, kind of getting that help from schools or coaches or, you know, the team you're playing for, making those connections. I think that's the most important thing, because I know a lot of people around the league in the WBBL would be more than happy to do it. Yeah, really get more exposure into the women's side.
And do you think it's like, because growing up, I never had a female PE teacher. Do you think that, in, you know, implementing more female PE teachers, get, you know, more women getting more, you know, degrees in, you know, in, you know, physical education? Do you think that, you know, that could then also spur, like, oh yeah, you know, these girls are, you know, they are girls, but they could still kick my ass.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For me, growing up, I think my first two coaches actually were women,
Hmm.
and I did have a woman PE teacher, and I think that really helped me in the aspect of, it wasn't just I'm doing this in school because I have to,
Yeah.
or this isn't fun. I had these women to look up to, as in they're teaching me these things. They think I'm capable. I know I'm capable because they're doing it and they're teaching it. So I think, yeah, if we can get more women around sport, it will definitely help.
What does it mean to you that, whilst playing for, for the Mystics here in England and going over to Germany, you are being seen by, little girls everywhere?
Mhm.
What does it mean to you to potentially be someone or by multiple people's role models right now?
Mhm. I think I take pride in that kind of thing of being a role model. So every time I'm on a team, I'll always make sure the younger girls push themselves harder than us older women are. Um, and same thing, like if I'm teaching a school or coaching in a school, I'll always make sure those kids that are passionate, I'll make a conscious effort to be like, you can do this. What I'm doing, you can do. Um, I think that's a huge important part of being a professional athlete is using your platform to help a younger generation get to where you are and surpass you.
Well, so you're playing. I mean, I guess whilst you're playing the games, you don't really have a lot of chance to look towards the crowd. But has there been any instance where you like see like a little girl that's like cheering you on and like that sort of hit you with a moment of pride that you like? Yeah, I'm making sure that the next generation of society is more accepting towards women in sports.
Yeah, well, one thing I remember is in college we used to do camps over the summers with kids, and there was this one girl that I could tell really wanted to get better. So the whole camp I was pushing her, making sure she was, never slacking, all that. After, her mum came up to me and was like, I just want you to know you've really like helped her. Last camp she came, no one really like talked to her, anything like that. And now all she wants to do is play basketball. And come season, I remember after the game, we'd sit around, do autographs, things like that. And she ran up to me and was like, oh, great game. And her mum was like, she's got season tickets to your games, all because I took the chance in a 2-day camp to make sure she felt involved and was like really enthusiastic about the camp. So I think that's the one time that I've been like, okay, I've made a difference.
Yeah. I mean, with that, role model and being proud aspect, sometimes there does come a time where, certain fans aren't really the best to be around. I mean, like, whether they are, sexist fans. I mean, all the time you get that on social media. Is there like a story that kind of stands out that's maybe affected you and maybe rubbed you the wrong way?
Uh, Again, in college, I was at one game. I was shooting free throws, and I remember there was this guy who obviously had a few drinks before the
No.
game. And free throws, it can be quite quiet. And all I remember is him shouting out all these sexist comments at me as I'm shooting. And usually you can, as an athlete, you just ignore it all. But this one time, all I could hear was this man, and it's horrible to be in a situation where that's what you have to deal with. Or, even as you said, the comments on Instagram and things like that. It's like you're degrading me as an athlete, which is my career, just because of, my sex, which is quite disappointing for sure.
Yeah, I mean, again, we don't know where it comes from, and some people have just grown up with that. Like that, it could be the fact that their parents have been like that, or their fathers have been such certain ways, and I guess it's like the old school mentality of like, oh, women this, women that. Like men, certain men do think they are above women, and I think it's the time where we do need to treat everybody as equal. It because a lot of aspects a lot of females are better than a lot of men. I mean, you could turn around to that guy in the crowd and be like, "Come on, come shoot the free throw, then. Come on."
It's
But
quite funny though. In high school, it was the same thing. A lot of the men would be, "I could beat you. I could beat you." So the way I am, I don't really get offended with it because you expect it most of the time. So for me, I was like, "All right, we'll play. You're talking your talk. Let's play." So I remember after school one day we played and definitely proved him wrong. I think it was like 10-2 to
wow,
finish. Um, I think that's one thing that women need to realize is like, no, we have that power, and people are going to say what they say, but if you can prove yourself and prove them wrong, like every aspect you have, you need to. So I definitely, yeah, done that a few times. It's great.
oh, I bet it's great to shut off all the haters and like sort of have like, you know what, I'm better than these, so this doesn't affect me.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Sort of going on to where we see the next generation of female talent, what advice would you give to, maybe, like, you're teaching a class? What's your main go-to advice to, sort of helping the next generation of talent move forward?
I think the main thing is not creating that separation. So if you're teaching and you have, if they're young boys and girls, you put them together. You don't say girls that side, guys that side, you play. At first, it may be hard because of, the development of kids and the athleticism and that. But if you create that divide early, women are always going to think, oh, I'm this side, they're that side. Like, no, put them all together. You're as good as each other. You're creating the same skill set. So I think, yeah, as they are younger, don't divide. Just always keep it together. I remember I used to do individuals with a guy, kill me every time, but it got to the point where, that gap was smaller and smaller. So yeah, I would definitely just make sure everyone was equal rather than creating the separation early. So with the evolution of the sport and women's side, they are making improvements with this. I was in a primary school this last season, and it was their lunchtime breaks, and they had the options of, you can do these skill training sessions. I think it was cricket, basketball, netball, and soccer or football. And they got to choose what they wanted. And Rianne Bailey used to do it, and then I came in. And the amount of kids that Rianne was able to like poach over to basketball, and then I took over it. There would be so many. There was actually more girls than guys coming over and doing it with us, and there was a few men's coaches as well. But they were so enthusiastic to get involved because, as I said, I think there's that evolution of, oh, basketball is this sport for anyone, any race, any sex, anything. It's something that anyone can do. So I think it's exciting to see that happening in a primary school, and if that can develop over all the different cities, it'll definitely help the sport.
I mean, it's sort of that mentality with everything, like realizing that society is trying, like, not necessarily in like actively trying, but inadvertently trying to make sure that the male stereotype and the patriarchy kind of stays on top, whereas the sort of the women's evolution of everything sort of is like, yeah, we can do this. Just it's just everyone else that's telling us no.
Yeah.
So it's amazing to see the next generation of of talent that comes through, male or female. I'm would definitely. I mean, are you definitely excited to see what comes up through? I mean, definitely through these schools that you're teaching at. Are you sort of excited to turn on your TV one day and be like, oh, I taught all of these?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely exciting to see. As I said, it's a process, so it will take time, but I think it is evolving to the point where it's going to be, you see it on the TVs, and yeah, I'm excited to see what happens with it.
Definitely. Sammy, thank you so much for joining me here on the Let's Talk Basketball podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, good luck for the new season. Sammy Roscoe here on the Let's Talk Basketball podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. I'll leave Sammy's Instagram and everything in the description down below for you to check out. And also, would you mind subscribing to the channel? And if you're listening on Spotify, would you please hit that follow button and give me a good rating? Why not? It's been a great first episode. So thank you so much, Sammy, for joining me, and we will see you next time.